Warning, this video contains spoilers for The Batman. Who do you think is scarier? The average Batman villain, or the usual Twilight fan? Sorry, I just wanted to get my Twilight joke out of the way early. I promise there won't be any more in this video. With Matt Reeves The Batman wowing audiences and critics alike, it seems like we're seeing the dawn of a brand new Bat franchise, and the events of the film open the door for a number of iconic villains to go up against Robert Pattinson's Batman in the near future. Let's take a look at 10 villains we could see in a sequel to The Batman. Whereas several recent superhero films like Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness have had several of their biggest reveals leaked online months and even years before their official releases, the team behind The Batman worked vigilantly to ensure that the movie's twists and turns remained under wraps. Unfortunately for them, there was one major reveal, one moment that was just too huge for word of it not to leak out. That moment is, of course, the introduction of the Joker to Matt Reeves' Batverse. Yes, Eternals actor Barry Keoghan makes his debut as the Clown Prince of Crime towards the end of The Batman, locked up and cackling away in Arkham Arkham State Hospital. He commends the Riddler, who just happens to be one cell over from him, on the chaos he's managed to bring to Gotham City, before cementing his role in this series' future by striking up a partnership with him. This scene makes it blatantly clear, almost annoyingly so, that Keoghan's Joker will be crossing paths with Robert Pattinson's Batman in the near future, and a sequel to The Batman seems like the most obvious place for him to pop up next. Considering how many live-action Joker incarnations we've had in recent years, it would be wise for Matt Reeves and crew to be patient when building up Keoghan's version. Bringing him in as the main antagonist for the second installment would open the film up to some almost insurmountable comparisons to The Dark Knight. So in my opinion, they shouldn't do Joker at all. Thanks for watching! But if they are gonna do Joker again, I think that they should wait it out and let him manipulate events from his cell in Arkham, proving how much of a danger he truly poses right before he is unleashed onto the streets of Gotham. He's the Joker, baby! Hush, little baby, don't make a din. Maddie's gonna buy you a sequel, villain. You guys like that one? Huh? I made it up myself.
I thought my jokes were bad.
One of the Batman's biggest plot twists is focused around the reveal that Thomas Wayne made a deal with Carmine Falcone to have a reporter silenced years ago. Of course, as should be expected when working with a ruthless mob boss like Falcone, the reporter ended up dead, and the subsequent cover-up of his disappearance serves as the Riddler's proverbial ace in the hole. When Batman and Jim Gordon uncover this secret, they learn that the reporter's name was Edward Elliot, a surname that should be very familiar to Batman fans as that of the supervillain Hush. In the comics, Hush, real name Tommy Elliot, is a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne's who grows up to become one of Gotham's top surgeons. Having secretly resented Wayne his whole life, Tommy becomes a supervillain named Hush and teams up with the Riddler to take down both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Following his debut in a major self-titled story arc, Hush has become one of the Dark Knight's more prominent foes, even having previously surgically altered himself to look just like Bruce Wayne. Certain elements of Paul Dano's take on the Riddler definitely felt somewhat inspired by Hush, especially his costume. However, the new potential backstory for the villain that the Batman sets up could allow for a fresh take on the character that would stand apart from both his comic incarnation and his predecessor villain. While the first film really focused on Batman and Riddler's obsession with him, the sequel could flip the script and explore more of Bruce Wayne's life as he deals with the vengeful son of the reporter who's out to get justice for his father's death. This was even hinted at in the film itself, with Riddler scrawling the word Hush over a picture of Thomas Wayne.
I don't care who you're, that's
Sequel bait.
right there.
While Riddler's big reveal in The Batman may have focused on Carmine Falcone's control over Gotham City, there's still plenty of dark secrets that are sure to lurk outside of view, and the Court of Owls may just be the biggest of them all. The Court is a secret society made up of Gotham's most wealthy and well-connected citizens, who have been pulling the strings within the city for centuries. They use undead brainwashed soldiers called Talons to enforce their rule, ruthlessly disposing of anyone who stands in their way. That is, until they cross paths with the Dark Knight. Leading up to the release of The Batman, I was positive, absolutely 100% sure, that the big secret Riddler was trying to expose was that the Wayne family were connected to the Court of Owls in some way. I was, of course, a tiny bit disappointed when the court ultimately failed to show their feathered heads, but after reflecting on it for some time, I think that Matt Reeves' Batverse may now be in an even better position to introduce them than before. With Gotham City basically in ruins following the success of the Riddler's plan, now's a perfect time for the Court of Owls to reassert themselves as the city's rulers. I could see them using their various affiliated businesses and organizations to fund the city's rebuilding, which in turn would reinforce their already ample control over it. At the same time, it could be revealed that they were affiliated with Carmine Falcone, and that the public uncovering of his operations has brought them closer to exposure than they've ever been, forcing them to send out the Talons. The existence of the Court of Owls destroyed everything that Bruce Wayne thought he knew about Gotham City in the comics, so it's exciting to theorize about how Robert Pattinson's more feral take on the Dark Knight could respond to the sinister Cabal's presence in what remains of his city. Pattinson himself has stated that he hopes to face off against the court in a sequel, so it seems like only a matter of time until they finally appear on the big screen. Gotham City's greatest mob boss, Carmine Falcone, may have been taken out by the Riddler during the events of The Batman, but his criminal legacy could live on with the introduction of his son, Alberto. The younger Falcone was introduced in the seminal Batman story The Long Halloween, in which he faked his death and then supposedly took up the mantle of the mysterious vigilante Holiday, who eliminated various mob-connected people over the course of a year. Now, whether Alberto actually was Holiday or not is a question that's been debated for years by comic fans, and I'm not here to provide any sort of big meaningful insight into that. However, with the way things went down in The Batman, there's a perfect opportunity to bring Alberto into a follow-up film. With Carmine gone, there's sure to be a massive power vacuum in Gotham City, and who better to fill it than his own flesh and blood? Granted, Alberto was shown to not be very good at the whole organized crime thing in The Long Halloween, but that could make for a really interesting dynamic in a movie. Rather than a seasoned and professional gangster, Gotham would now be under the control of a newbie with little experience to his name, which could be the chance that the city's freaks need to seize control of it from the mob. Alternatively, a sequel to The Batman could bring Holiday to the big screen, with Batman having to work with Gordon and maybe some other allies to figure out the mystery behind his identity. Alberto could be introduced as a suspect, with his connection to Carmine closely tying that film's events to the first one. Either way, there's a lot of potential for future stories with the Falcone crime family, and it would be a lot of fun to see just how the rest of them react to Carmine's death. Also, this is completely unrelated to anything, but does anyone else remember the rumors that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was going to be playing Alberto in The Dark Knight Rises? Good times. One aspect of The Batman that felt somewhat underdeveloped was the existence of drops, a mysterious drug sweeping the streets of Gotham City. The drug was apparently a hallmark of Sal Maroni's criminal empire, but when he was taken down by the GCPD, Carmine Falcone took over their distribution. While the drops may have ultimately served as nothing more than a minor piece of world building, it's possible that their inclusion could bring about the Reeves-verse debut of the Mad Hatter. The Hatter is one of Batman's most twisted foes, a mad scientist who uses technology implanted within various pieces of headwear to brainwash his victims. As his name suggests, he is obsessed with Lewis Carroll's book Alice in Wonderland, and most of his crimes revolve around his incredibly creepy attempts to find his own Alice. Mad Hatter is also usually depicted as an affiliate of the Wonderland Gang, a group of villains who are also themed around Lewis Carroll's stories. So how could Mad Hatter be introduced in the sequel to The Batman? Well, I think he could be introduced as the new manufacturer and distributor of the drops, having altered the drug's properties as part of a scheme to recruit a brainwashed army of people addicted to it. Rather than having a bunch of people walking around with dorky hats, this would be a tidy way to update Mad Hatter's MO for Reeves' much more realistic and gritty Batman universe, while also following up on a loose end from the first film. Speaking of the Wonderland Gang, Dumfrey and Deaver Tweed, aka Tweedledee and Tweedledum, are two more Lewis Carroll-themed villains who seem to be primed and ready for an introduction in the Batman 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, that's the name of it. I actually just got off the phone with Matt Reeves, he told me. He also told me Big Wheel was going to be the villain, which is weird because I thought he was a Marvel character. Two of the Batman's more memorable minor characters were the twins, a pair of identical bouncers for the Iceberg Lounge played by Charlie and Max Carver. These two are never given names in the film, but it wouldn't be a stretch to reveal them as being the Tweeds. They could either continue to show up as the Penguin's muscle, or they could be recruited by Mad Hatter for a potential live-action interpretation of the Wonderland Gang. The Tweeds' presence as recurring goons could provide a villainous through line in a similar way to how Scarecrow was the only villain to appear in every Christopher Nolan Batman movie.
I don't need help.
Not my diagnosis.
Mr. Freeze is a really cool villain. After discovering that his wife Nora had a terminal illness, scientist Victor Fries cryogenically froze her while working on a cure for her condition. Unfortunately, an accident lowered his body to sub-zero temperatures, forcing him to build a specialized suit to survive. With his heart now cold as ice, Fries became one of the Dark Knight's most notorious foes, with his focus exclusively set on finding a cure for himself and his wife, no matter the cost. It's no wonder why some people may not want to see Mr. Freeze on the big screen again after Arnold Schwarzenegger's disastrous turn as the villain in Batman and Robin. But I think those people just need to chill out. Despite the fact that he has a pretty ridiculous gimmick, if his origin and motivations are done properly, Freeze has the potential to become the most tragic Batman villain of all time. He's essentially frozen in a lose-lose situation, and the argument could be made that Batman would be taking away Nora's chance at life by defeating her husband. Mr. Freeze's ice-cold demeanor and single-minded focus on curing Nora would effectively mirror Reeves' reclusive Bruce Wayne and his obsession with fighting crime. The end of the film seems to indicate that Bruce will be working to make Batman a slightly more uplifting force for Gotham, and Mr. Freeze's arrival on the scene could help to show just how far he's come. Not to mention, Matt Reeves has named Freeze as a villain he'd like to adapt for the sequel, so why not? He seems to be a big fan of the character. In fact, you could say it was love at frost sight. I'm really trying to think of more ice puns, but I can't. So I'm going to move on to the next entry now.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Thanks, Arnold. Despite what you may have seen in The Dark Knight Rises, Bane is not usually depicted as a mush-mouthed British guy with a weird bondage mask.
It would be extremely painful.
It would be extremely painful. Instead, the original comic book version of Bane was an inmate in the South American prison Piña Duro, where he was experimented on with a strength-enhancing green drug called Venom.
Like a turd in the wind.
No, not that one. Empowered by the addictive drug, Bane became a nearly unbeatable fighter, and soon he escaped Santa Prisca and traveled to Gotham City to take on the Batman. Bane's most famous story arc is Nightfall, in which he weakens Batman for months before finally confronting him and breaking his back. Don't worry, he got better. During the Batman's final big action scene, our pointy-eared hero goes down after taking a beating from the Riddler's followers. Realizing that he's out of options, Batman injects himself with a glowing green serum that bears an undeniable resemblance to Bane's Venom. Now, I personally believe that this is just adrenaline, but let's say for the sake of things that it is in fact Venom. Could that open the door for a storyline where Batman gets addicted to it? I mean, God, Pattinson's Batman's dedication to crime fighting is basically an addiction in itself. Venom would just be an ample metaphor to visualize it. Besides, it happened in the comics as a precursor to Bane's first appearance, so I could definitely see something similar happening to Pattinson right before the Muscle Man himself shows up to cause some havoc. Tom Hardy's portrayal of Bane was great, if not a little bit goofy.
Of course.
Okay, kind of a lot goofy, so a slightly more comic-accurate version of the character would be a ton of fun to see in Matt Reeves' new Batman universe. When he's not running Janus Cosmetics, businessman Roman Sionis operates as the Gotham City crime lord, the Black Mask. Similarly to Hush, Sionis was born into a rich family but always felt jealous of Bruce Wayne. After burning his house down with his parents inside, Roman lost focus on everything but his newfound wealth, and proceeded to run their makeup company into the ground. In order to make back his lost fortune, Roman became the Black Mask. Black Mask is another villain who has just as much beef with Bruce Wayne as he does with Batman, which could be a fascinating avenue to go down in a sequel to The Batman. While the Caped Crusader's decision to become a symbol of hope at the end of the first film will certainly help to inspire Gotham citizens, there's also sure to be many who will take the wrong message from this, similarly to how the Riddler and his followers misunderstood the Dark Knight's intentions. I could easily see Black Mask and his gang rising up and trying to copy Batman's use of a mask to hide his face, without truly understanding why it is that he wears the cowl. Essentially, Roman Sionis is the vapid playboy idiot that everyone thinks Bruce Wayne is, and it would be cool to see that contrast come to life on screen, especially with Pattinson's incredibly edgy Bruce Wayne. I mean, come on, he wears sunglasses inside. While Roman Sionis may have been the first Black Mask, his successor in the role was none other than Jeremiah Arkham, a descendant of the infamous family that created Arkham Asylum. During a time in the comics in which Batman was presumed dead, Jeremiah, who was serving as the asylum's head, went insane and took up the mantle of Black Mask, blowing up his own asylum and trying to take over the city's underworld. While Matt Reeves' interpretation of Arkham Asylum wasn't shown too much in The Batman, we did learn that Bruce Wayne's mom was a member of the Arkham family, and that she spent time in the asylum herself thanks to a family history of mental illness. With this backstory in mind, the asylum feels like a pretty cursed place, and the introduction of Jeremiah would help to bring this to the next level, especially because he would be related to Bruce. Matt Reeves mentioned that a previously announced spin-off series about the GCPD would heavily delve into the lore of Arkham Asylum, so that seems like it would be an appropriate place for Jeremiah to appear. No matter what, Jeremiah Arkham is an essential ingredient for a full exploration of the Arkham legacy. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Matt Sonnack, and I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you're as big of a fan of justice as I am, make sure you leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time the CBR signal hits the sky, or your subscription feed.